All right, folks, welcome to our 10th installment of the Data Fam Community Jam. I'm one of your co-hosts, one of the co-leaders of this event. Just a big thank you to the other co-leaders, Emily Kund, Sarah Bartlett, Lorna Eden Brown, and Jordan Scott from Tableau. So today, just like normal, we have four incredible speakers. We're going to, they're going to each talk for about 20 minutes, and time permitting, we'll take some questions at the end of their presentation. If you want to chat with other attendees, feel free to do so. Please do that in the chat. If you have questions specifically for the presenters, then we ask that you use the Q&A function. So just open Q&A, ask the question. Our team will be answering questions as we go. If they're technical questions, if they're specific questions to the presenters, then the presenters will try to answer them when they're done, or we'll actually have them answered live. So this event is being recorded. It should be available typically the following week. So look for it on Tableau's YouTube site next week. And I think that's really it for housekeeping. So let's go ahead and introduce our first speaker, if I can get my slides to work. Our first speaker is Irene Schmidt. She is from the New York City Tug, New York City, boo. And she's going to be talking about Hyper, SQL, and why she loves Tableau. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Irene.
Hi, everyone. Let me just get my screen here shared. Yes, I'm from New York. It's a warm day and not as warm as in Arizona. I see some of the chats going on. That looks really brutal. Okay, so here we go. Sharing screen. And Kevin, do you see?
We can see it perfectly. You're all set?
I'm all set. I'm just going to minimize myself here. Okay, so my topic just came to me right away when I thought of doing this, and it's SQL Hyper and why I love Tableau. And I gave it a subtitle because I always actually think it's really cool when people have subtitles that sort of expand on it. And as I was writing it, my subtitle became "Become a Powerful Cross-Functional Tableau Jedi Through Understanding Hyper and Tableau and SQL." And the reason I chose that subtitle is because I'm from sort of a cross-functional space. I'm between IT and a business area. And, we're sometimes called power users. And I really think that there's a possibility for a lot of power users or people who are sort of in that space to expand into some of these harder topics like Hyper and SQL and really maximize them, in their Tableau life. So my agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we learn. I'm sort of a learning buff about theories of learning and how we learn, and I'll go into that just a touch. I'm not a psychologist. I'll talk a little bit about Hyper because Hyper is so important. If you've missed it, if somehow that you just haven't gotten into it yet, it's just just something you really need to know. Structured query language, that's going to be the bulk of my presentation. SQL, hopefully just about everyone on this call has heard of it or dabbled in it a little bit. And if you have, I think it's just monumentally important skill. And I hopefully through watching my presentation, you'll see why. I'm going to attempt in this 20-minute time period to delve into how SQL can actually, and understanding how it relates to Tableau can help you pass some Tableau hurdles. I'm not going to go into an absolutely full-blown discussion of SQL and how it helps with Tableau, but I'm going to try to give you a SQL as an organizational framework to understanding Tableau better than some of the common difficult pieces. I'm also going to talk a little, and even just throughout my presentation, just watching me, seeing my background and how I'm discussing this, I want you to think about just cross-functional thinking. People doing Tableau who may have some IT experience, may have some business experience, can cross back and forth between operational thinking and business thinking, and how this product just really supports that and is really a home run. I'm so happy to have discovered it. My background, my name is Irene Schmidt. Thanks, Kevin. I am employed at New York University. My position there is database manager, and I work in financial systems management, which is a quasi-technical group supporting finance. I'm also very newly enrolled at the Stern School of Business, and I'm going for my master's in quantitative management. And I know there's a lot of master's programs around now, especially related to data science. I chose this one because it gives leadership fundamentals, business fundamentals, plus data analytics and data science. And I thought it was, I'm just starting, so I can't give you a whole, if anyone wants to chat with me about it as the year goes on, I'd love to. It just seemed like a great program that fits this whole data world. I'm certified recently. I'm a Tableau desktop certified associate, which is you're newer to Tableau. That's the second test. It was actually kind of difficult. It was a big milestone for me. It happened recently. I took the first test and the second test pretty much back to back, which worked out as a good strategy. And I've attended TC17 and TC19 in Las Vegas. TC17, I did the beginner class, I guess it's called Desktop Fundamentals, but I didn't use Tableau until a couple years later, and it was actually just 12 months ago that I had a need at work, and I, really got into it. And so the last 12 months, I've been pretty intensely focused on it and enjoying myself greatly. As far as my other experience and the experience that most informs this presentation, I have worked both in IT and, like I said, I work in finance, in higher education. But if you look at my chart over here, not a donut. It's not a donut. It is, I can't remember what the exact name of these are, but when you have the middle here, but you can see that I've worked most of my time in IT, 15 of my 25 years, but that's older experience. My newer experience is working in small business and at NYU in financial systems. But when I did work in IT, I worked on a very challenging full stack Java development team at First Data. During that time also at First Data, I got to be pretty much a specialist in anything SQL related to even Java. So Java, building class modules, using dynamic SQL in Java. And then I became an Oracle PL SQL developer back there. And that experience, of course, great. When it comes to higher ed and finance, I've been working a lot with tax-exempt bonds. Tax-exempt bonds, because of compliance and because of their 30-year nature, there's tons of interesting data sets to work on at NYU. And I've been doing data visualizations and really making a difference this year with bringing data visualization into compliance and bonds, which aren't known to be the most exciting finance topics. I'm currently leading a small Tableau development team within financial systems management. And just one other note, that when it comes to SQL, when I said over there in the middle of my donut, I've been working, my career is 25 years. I think that SQL, I learned it about 24 years ago. So it's pretty amazing that I'm starting a school at Stern School of Business that actually has a class that's pretty much dedicated to SQL. And I'm doing this topic now. You just never know what the skill is that's going to carry you through your career. When it comes to me, just what I do elsewhere, I love biking and traveling in New England, especially. I love exploring New York City. That's the Arch in Washington Square, the campus where NYU is located. I'm also trying to branch out during the whole pandemic. Some people are baking bread. I've been polishing up on my German skills. I had learned German as a child and took it for years in school. I was always very shy about speaking it out loud. So I'm going to say now, ich liebe meine Kinder, Tennis, Radfahren, zu lernen. I have no idea if the grammar is exactly right there, but I think that's the first time of speaking Tableau, and I think to hundreds of people, and I feel better already. When it comes to other interests, like I said before, I'm very interested in psychology and psychology of learning. I actually took some graduate classes um, years ago at Hunter College, thinking that I might become a teacher. And I was actually not really interested in the hands-on teaching part. I was much more interested in the theories of learning. And even though I didn't get a degree and I left that program, those classes have been just hugely important to me, even as I went to a completely different career. When it comes to my personality style, I'm definitely on the introverted. I think you can even see my score, 62% there if you look closely. I tend to be introverted, intuitive, thinking and perceiving, and that personality profile for Myers-Briggs is about 4% of the population. And that makes it kind of weird that I'm out here doing this, but I was really just motivated by the TC19 keynote by Susan Cain. Her whole topic pretty much was around introverted people and how we are leaders and can become leaders, and that doing these kinds of things that take us out of our comfort zone actually bring us into the new experiences and the new challenges that we really need. So that's enough about me. Actually, there's one more slide. Well, this isn't about me, this is about learning. And like I said, I have always, for years, loved learning about how we learn. And as a programmer for so many years, I would just say, wow, if I could just get into flow state. I love being in flow state. And this is sort of part of pop culture now a little bit. But getting into flow state is when you're doing something so interesting and it's both challenging and you're developing the skills that you need to meet that challenge. And you're in this sort of space in here, and I actually tried to make this mathematical and give you guys a viz, but it didn't turn out as well as I would want it. Didn't turn out, ready for prime time. But it's really about getting into this middle zone here where you are playing, you're being creative, you're doing your job, but you're taking it in different directions because you have a balance between, challenge and skill. And it occurred to me, even though my viz for this wasn't really ready for prime time, that this is actually showing an equilibrium. And that equilibrium is so important. So, Tableau, easily. I've been up 10 all-nighters, and not because I had a deadline, but because I was just in flow state, doing so much, learning so much, moving up. And I started with two things. I started with learning the front end, learning all the charts and graphs and types of things and all the beautiful presentation layer. And that I used right away at work. That's what I modeled the 30-year bonds, and I used some of the data prep tools to do the bringing together. You can imagine a bond is 30 years. We have data at NYU in all different formats, using data prep tools to bring that together. So I was kind of working the very, very beginning end of Tableau, and I was working sort of the front end layer. And I was actually starting to tell people, oh, you know what? Tableau is like web development, and you FTP it to the Tableau server. And, I was really getting into Tableau as, as just that. And I also hit a plateau. I wasn't really getting it when it came to some of the calculations, especially table calculations. And I started, instead of coming from sort of an understanding, viewpoint, I started going online and trying to memorize and order of operations. I was trying to memorize all the different acronyms and stuff that are helpful for that. And it really wasn't as fun because I just didn't feel like I was understanding. And then I got into some videos, and I went on YouTube, and there's actually many of them, and I have a list at the end of my presentation that as kind of a little bibliography of the ones that I stumbled upon. And what's cool about YouTube is they sort of just queue you up the next one, so you don't even have a chance to say, oh, that's over my head, or that's not something I'm interested in. And the one that really hit me was one from TC Europe 18. It was Alex Lokov and Alex Eskenazi. I apologize if I get that right. Talking about SQL. And also some other videos. Tobias Mulbauer was the key person in those. One was called Boom Goes the Data Engine. I really like that title. And from that, I was really shocked about a couple things. And I was, bring me to the next slide. Alex Lakov and Alex Eskenazi asked each other, Alex, what is Tableau? And this is a Rorschach, if you guys don't, everybody knows this, but it's a Rorschach diagram. And you know, they asked, what is Tableau? And they had a certain answer that really surprised me. And of course, I'm going to go into that answer, which I've probably given away by my title and everything else. But it occurred to me that I wasn't wrong that Tableau was a front-end development tool that can publish, you know, beautiful, you know, front-end work. I wasn't wrong that Tableau, you know, is a kind of a back-end tool that can take in data and different prep, you know, being prepped in different ways and handle that. But this middle piece was answered by their answer to this question. And I'm combining this with, you know, some other things too, just for time. But basically, oops, that shouldn't have gone off yet. My confetti drop was a little fast. Okay, so Tableau is SQL. Now, I think what they actually said is Tableau is an interface to SQL. I'm simplifying it even further and saying Tableau is SQL. And Hyper is a SQL-based relational database within Tableau. And because I'm going to go on for a while about SQL, I'm just going to spend an extra minute talking about Hyper because they kind of go together, though not completely. Tableau as SQL can also be, you know, used as a way to organize your thoughts around live connections. Okay, live connections, they go to a relational database. That makes sense. There's SQL going on. But when your data is brought into Hyper, it's actually being brought into a relational database. And that database is SQL based. I didn't know that. And one of the reasons I missed it is because when I left IT about 9 years ago, you know, SQL was there, but everyone was talking about all these different NoSQLs. And I just remember doing like XML and looping through the DOM for like the last year there. Like it was, you know, doing other types of, you know, database, file-based, you know, data, just things that weren't quite SQL or weren't quite relational. So I didn't just take it as a given that it was a relational database. The other thing I learned from watching some of these Tableau conference videos is that Hyper is sort of a special database. It was required, it's German, you know, from Germany. I think, I don't know if we get the dates right, but I would say that around 2008, but it was acquired by Tableau 2016, 2017 time period. And it has some special properties. And one of the special properties is that it uses compiled SQL. And I can't explain here exactly, you know, all the ins and outs of that, but it's sort of like something that's so old it's new. Something that's so old it's new that now that it's new and now that it's being used in Hyper, Hyper is able to maximize modern database hardware, modern database, the size of CPUs, and all those things that have grown, you know, so big since SQL came around, which was like 30, 35 years ago. And definitely look at my bibliography and go into these videos, but I thought this was like really special stuff. Hyper is super fast because it's able to use compiled SQL, and that Hyper is SQL based, and that brings into like my experience. Like I wasn't really maximizing my experience as a PL SQL developer and someone who's known SQL for 24, 25 years. So balloon confetti drop, this is a big deal. If this is something that you don't know, it's a big deal. Just before I move on, I just want to also say that if you don't know SQL or really, or if you've only just heard it, I'm just going to give you one little thing here, one little quote. This is from an InfoWorld article by Martin Heller, and he explains the select statement in SQL as a select statement tells the query optimizer or the database what data to return, what tables to look in, what relations to follow, how it is grouped, and what order to impose on the return data. So if you need to know more, definitely go off, but that's my. So the next thing I want to show you is a little video I made. This was originally intended to be my finale, but I wasn't sure if I was going to get to the finale. And I thought this was actually made it kind of pretty clear. And what I like about it too is that I did this video from the perspective of SQL, not the perspective first of Tableau. So as the video goes on, you'll understand what I mean. But I think this would be helpful to someone who's just tuning in, who has more of a technical background, more of a SQL background than they have a Tableau background. And their schema, their, when we talk about flow and learning, we're putting new things we learn into existing schemas. I don't mean schemas like database schema. I mean, organization of how we, process information ourselves. So I'm just going to show this real quick. It's only 1 minute. And I could only pick from 10 songs that are in the public domain. So I picked this one. Hope you enjoy it. Just minimize. And that was super simple. And I hope anyone out there who either has had SQL in their past and didn't realize how much Tableau, could be used and could be leverage those skills, or somebody who maybe hasn't learned it and thought, wow, SQL might be like Python. I might not be able to really just get into that right away, or like R. I do think that when it comes to SQL, it's not the most complex type of coding, type of language, and really could be for anyone. And I want to just do a little bit more of a live demo of this. And this is using a tool called Tableau Log Viewer. It's available on GitHub. There's a pre-compiled version out there that I found today that's actually pretty easy to install. GitHub, you can get into pre-registration and get lots of stuff. So I'm going to bring up Tableau Log Viewer. But like I said, I thought my video should be shown first because Tableau Log Viewer is going to show the SQL after it's made in Tableau. And it's actually reading your hyper log, it's hyper-D log. So hyper is sometimes called hyper-D, which I think sounds very cool. So I'm just going to show you this here. This is more live, a little riskier here for everything working, but I'm going to go here. And I don't think this is going to stay up at the same time, but I'm going to build just a super duper easy Superstore. Everyone knows Superstore. I could build the same one in the video or one just a little different. Let's just build one a little different. So let's do something like, I don't know, ship mode and quantity. Go over into our viewer. why that doesn't seem to be giving me the new. Okay, so now I'm really glad that I did what I did. I'm not sure why my my tool isn't working exactly right, but I can show you back here some of my older ones, that it just gives you, as you're working in the tool, it gives you the sequel, and this can get really, really complicated. I'm intentionally showing you ones that are easy, but this can get really complicated and all different types. I'm just gonna try one other try. I think maybe this is a query that I've already done. So I don't want to waste too much time on this, but let's do something else. Let's do second. See if that improves it. Ah, it did. Okay, and there's things I'm learning, like, okay, why didn't that show up? Is it something in how Tableau is optimizing things? That was actually one of the ones I guess I did as a practice, and maybe it's already, been done by Tableau and is saved somehow. So there's all sorts of things that this can lead to with deeper thinking into how Tableau is working. And what I started doing was going into some of my more complex vizzes that I thought were so cool and I'd done so well, and looking at the SQL behind them. And this is what I did. And part of the reason this is in here is I want to give you guys a really full workbook to download. And this is kind of nice dashboard. It's not the most complex thing in the world, but it gives like a year over year of sales for Superstore, and then these nice comments. Everybody seems to like comments. I really like them, and they give you a little break from the sort of Ginsu knife of bar charts. And I also have this little measure swap going on up here that's color coded. So if you're interested in that, there's some presentations today about color. So just to extend that theme, you might want to download this. But that's one of my recent vizzes. And here's another one. And this one is kind of interesting from SQL perspective because it's doing a top N, cohort here based on my cohort size. But then I'm also looking at what are the metrics related to that cohort. So this really needs context filtering, which is part of order of operations. It's one of those things that's hard to understand. And it's really easy to understand when you see that, okay, you have this first visualization, but you have the second one that has to build on it. So you really need to go to the database twice. And that explained context filters for me. And I'm just going to show you. I didn't print out all the SQL from those visits, but I just sort of picked, something to show you how sort of involved it gets and how you can kind of dig into this stuff. And when I dig into this, I'm like, wow, I'm actually doing a lot of wasteful things in those visualizations that I thought were pretty good. So what helped me about this is that I already know SQL, or at least know it pretty well, and at this level. So reactivating this schema, meaning my organizational schema, is just more effective than me memorizing. It's more effective than me doing things repetitively or other learning strategies. So I'm talking to people here who might not look at this and say, oh my gosh, they might look at this and say, wow, I get this. When Tableau can be actually pretty confusing for someone, as they're getting going. So next, implications. This really explains a whole lot when it comes to Tableau organization and the rules of engagement, especially when it comes to calculations, order of operations, and what I term other curiosities and confusions. And I just added the thing about dual axis charts on here because I thought of it last night. This is like one of the curiosities. Oh, dual axis charts. Do you think that there's going to be two sequels? Is there going to be one? Is it depend on how different they are? How much can dual axis charts be different from each other when it comes to the data? Order of operations, I already showed you an example when it comes to context filters, how that can help. But the calculations, the simple and the table calculations and LOD, I'm not stressing LOD as much because I haven't gotten enough into the whole 2020.2 noodles. I mean, I've done it on a couple workbooks, but not enough to go into this may have changed. So I'm focusing on simple and table calculations and the implications when it comes to SQL. So now some thinking. Okay. So you were on your first day on the Tableau programming team, the Tableau engineering team, I'm not sure what it's called, but you find this assignment on your desk. It says in a post-it, I guess your boss is busy or whatever, and this is not a request for anything from Tableau to do. Just by the way, this is just sort of just for fun. Welcome. Table calculations are unpopular. Plan a new solution to render this viz using the SQL framework. Evaluate the following. Do you need a new shelf? What would the new SQL look like? Is it possible to fully create table calculations this way? Is it wise? What do you think? Double space, 12 font, point font, you know the drill. Have fun today, Tableau. And I'll just give you a few seconds to think about it, just sort of like a second for me to get my breath, you to get your breath too, if it's something that this isn't where you're at. But let's just see, say 10 seconds. And there's no right answer. Okay. Like I said, there's really no right answer. That was a running sum. And it was really a two-part table calculation there that was going on, you know, a primary and a secondary table calculation. So I guess whatever the new solution is that didn't involve table calcs and somehow involves SQL, I do think would be pretty complicated. But in order to really get into it, we always have to first start by understanding the current process and understanding it from a dynamic SQL perspective. And dynamic SQL is, you know, building SQL on the fly from your front end. So now, this screen looks a little dense, and so maybe it is. So I'm going to try to, you know, focus on what I've highlighted in my NYU violet color. And there's differences between, obviously, simple calculations and table calculations. And I sort of intuitively got simple calculations just so much more than table calculations. But I was always confused. So after I did the exercises with SQL, I felt that I could sort of lay it out. And the way I conceived this screen was sort of like almost like a geometry proof, where if you know something is true, then all these other things just naturally are true. So starting with simple calculations, and these are calculations that are done by using analyze, create, calculated field. And there's many traditional functions and control structures that you can use, like if then, you know, type structures. There's many traditional functions like date diff and date add. And if you've done SQL, which has a million different dialects and different databases, but you'll sort of think, oh, these all sort of sound like ones that I've used before. And there's a reason for that. And if I was going to do a calculation of profit ratio, the SQL that would be generated by Tableau in this traditional way would be select region, if I used region, sum of profit divided by sum sales, as profit ratio, that's my alias, from orders, which is my table, I'm going to group by region. And when you're doing SQL, you know, this is like something that doesn't matter what database you've used, what dialect of SQL you use. Group by is king of the SQL statement. It sets the scope. Scope is a term I've used in Tableau, but I didn't really sink in until I thought of it this way. That in SQL, you need to group first and then do your calculations second. So the calculations you're doing are on a record that's flat as a pancake. meaning that you only have access to what that resulting group by record looks like. This is like an absolute rule SQL. And I don't know if you noticed in the video I showed where we were playing the music and whatever, as soon as I said group by 2 fields, I actually cut and pasted those exact 2 fields up into the top of my SQL statement. I always thought that was annoying, but I always have, for 20 years, done it that way. That group by, and then I know I have to select those same fields. I also know that everything has to be aggregated, because once I'm grouping, I'm dealing with more than one, value in my measures field. So it doesn't really occur to me that that's strange. And when I'm doing calculations in Tableau, and Tableau starts giving me error messages about this has to be aggregated and that has to be aggregated, I never really knew what was going on. But now that I understand it from a SQL-based perspective, I think of these simple calculations as intra-record calculations, that you're working within that resulting flat as a pancake group by record, and you could only be within that space. That's your scope. But when it comes to, and all these are the things you can read, too much for right now, but are true. When you go over here into table calculations are different. They're created using, there's like a context menu that you guys probably know to do a quick table calculation, but they can also be used, created in the same way regular calculations are used over in the analysis create calculate field, using a special set of table record functions. First, last, total, window sum, running sum. I'm sure I forgot some. There's lots of them. And based on that profit ratio, let's say you want it to be a running total or some kind of year results, those functions are used to do the calculations. And these calculations can be described as inter-record calculations. You don't have that same group by regulation anymore, where you do with these intra-record calculations. You can stay within your record, so it's not absolute. But intra-record calculations have really a lot, when you think about it, they're really very powerful that they can do this. So I'm going to go down to the second purple second naturally. Naturally, inter-record calculations have many more options than intra-record calculations because their grid is 2-dimensional. It's not flat as a pancake. So being able to go up and down and move around is actually really special. And I used to think, oh, should be more like Excel. I don't feel that way anymore. I think table calculations are impressive. I think table calculations are powerful, and I really like the way they work now. Next, why do I love Tableau? I hope that's kind of like running through the whole presentation, but I just find Tableau to be extremely activating. I love getting into flow state. I love being up and just learning and going up, through all the different things. I can't wait to get even past sort of the Tableau associate level and get into data connectors and getting into extensions and tab pi, all those things. I know that I had to get past this hurdle first, but I love Tableau because it supports that type of learning. It's made my job so fun. If you are a technical manager who's thinking of coming on with Tableau, like, you're not just going to get a dashboard, you're going to get an invigorated team of people who are doing cross-functional work, who can go back and forth between technical to layout. It creates beautiful, I call them magazine, I don't even know if that's an outdated term, but magazine quality visualizations that are just stunning. And that's why I love it. I love that Hyper is fast. It was that's one of the things I noticed right away, even though I had no idea what it was. I forgot to mention one thing. If you've ever used Microsoft Access and like the Jet engine, the Jet database engine within Access, that's sort of a similar way to think about this, even though Access is a completely different product. I always use Access as a utility, even through years of programming. It's just so handy and dandy for different things. But now Tableau is taking over my heart. I hope everyone will get into it if they haven't already. So that's why I love Tableau. And I think I have one more slide I'm having trouble getting to. Oh, okay. So just a takeaway. If you already know SQL and don't realize how important it is to Tableau, definitely leverage it. Review it, leverage it, maybe take a break from what you're doing with your, visualizations when it comes to, at one point I wanted to get into like Sankey and all these things that are very advanced, maybe go back into the middle of the application a little bit, start leveraging your Tableau knowledge. And, it's not an absolute in that it's not going to give you every answer, but it's going to lead you to so much thought. Like even the fact that, Hyper uses compiled SQL and Live Connections uses, the SQL a different way. Like all these things, these nuances, how it's optimized, there's join culling and all the other things going on in the background, that this is just a gateway. Please go for it. And if you don't know SQL at all, dive in. There's a Khan Academy actually has something. There's lots of free things. And like I said, compared to an object-oriented programming language like Python or something like R, I think SQL is an even better starting point. This is how I always answer questions when I see them posted about what they should learn first. I always do say SQL. And always remember that the magic of the product or any product that you're using is you. It's what you take to that meeting. If you're a techie that's suddenly presenting data at a board meeting, like I said, this product is so big in so many different directions, and you can really get into it and show your magic. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, Irene. Thank you so much. We're probably just going to push on to the next one. Just very, very quick before I move on. I didn't know SQL before I started using Tableau. And now that I do know SQL, I found that it's very, very powerful to know SQL to help you learn Tableau. So if you're wanting to get started, a couple different resources I use. There's something called w3schools.com. It has a whole training thing that you can walk through. And then a shameless plug. My brother Ken Flerlich on the FlerlichTwins.com wrote, I think, 6 different blog posts, and it talks about using SQL and from a Tableau user's perspective. So if you're just getting started, a couple of good resources to start with. So, all right, I'm going to share my screen now. And next up, we have Nathan Adams. Nathan Adams is from London, so London Tug, and he's going to be talking about dark mode. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Nathan.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm just going to share my screen. Give us a shout when you see it. All good there, Kevin?
All good, Nathan. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Cool. Thanks, everyone. So I'm Nathan Adams. I work as a senior data visualization engineer at Expedia Group in London, usually in the London office, obviously at my home at the moment. And seeing as everyone's talking about the weather on the chat, I can report that is 28 C here, which is 82 in Fahrenheit. And tomorrow we're looking at 34, which is 93. So it sounds like it's hot for everyone, and definitely hot here in London as well. So again, yeah, thanks for having me to the Tableau team, and thanks everyone for dialing in, hoping everyone's keeping well. For the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be discussing the use of dark backgrounds in data visualization, their sort of rise in modern times and their rise within the Tableau community, visualization community. We're going to discuss some benefits, some considerations, and the use cases, and hopefully you can take away some practical tips from this session. So I come from a bit of an academic background, really. I graduated a few years back studying a science degree at the University of Bath here in the UK. And I've also always been interested in the theory and the science and the why of things. So this is especially true for design and visualization. And my role at Expedia Group is partly to build data products for the business, but the other part of that is to enable and educate. So that looks at things like best practices, do's and don'ts within Tableau and within visualization, and as well as looking at sort of modern research trends. So that's what really got me interested in this. And And typically things do come across from the UX and design world. So dark mode is definitely in at the moment. Again, I was sort of interested to research about this because dark mode is everywhere. And when I'm talking about dark mode, I mean the operating systems when we're looking at things like Android and Apple. So this is where you can simply toggle from your standard light mode to dark mode. And we're seeing that on things like WhatsApp now, on Twitter, and any sort of devices, Stack Overflow, on Slack. And this is how it looks, and it's sort of the colors are essentially inverted. But I actually did this talk at the start of the year at a London-based event called Tiny Tableau Talks, a bit of a shorter version. But that was when there was even a buzz about it to start with, and there was some articles out there asking why 2019 was the year of dark mode, why is everyone switching to dark mode, and even since doing that talk back in early February, I've seen it even more within the visualization space. So much so that not sure if you guys are on Twitter, but it's definitely a great place to chat visualization, get inspired. But Peter tweeted this actually back in February. Why is everyone now using dark backgrounds in their vids? And there was a bit of chatter on that. So you can safely say that dark mode has sort of made its way into the data visualization world. And it's an important consideration, right? Because we're seeing more and more of a focus on the design elements within our dashboards and visualizations. And you could question, are there really real benefits to having these things like dark background, or does it just look cooler? So I don't know if the chat will explode, but do chuck in the chat whether you prefer dark or light modes, or whether you like them both as equal. But actually, dark mode is not really a new concept, and it can be traced back to when computers sort of first were built. Not really by design or choice, but some of the early computers had was a black background with this sort of green text on. Then towards the 1980s, you had companies like Xerox, which was a word processing machine. They actually replicated the look and feel of pen and paper by having a light background with dark text. And then it was only many years later when we started seeing the rise of the internet and where we have high screen resolution monitors, we start seeing lots of different color on the screen. And that's really when, we started to see light backgrounds as the norm, as opposed to seeing dark backgrounds. And I guess, you could say that some of the different coding applications have been a bit ahead of the curve on this. And my hypothesis there is that it just looks it's always looked a bit more retro, to code on Visual Studio or whatever notepad in a darker mode. So not everyone is a fan, or not actually is it really that beneficial for you, but some people are saying, is it really better for you? Is it actually hurting you in terms of eye strain? Some people just don't like it, and some people think it's not good for productivity. So many do claim it is beneficial, but a lot of the UX research out there are saying, hold on, let's take a look at the flip side here as well. But ultimately, our studies have concluded that our human brains are hardwired to actually favor dark images or dark text on top of the light background. And that can be sort of predated back to prehistoric times. But really more research here needs to be conducted to get a firm sort of grasp on this, especially in dark backgrounds in visualization. So how does this all sort of translate into the viz world? Well, here's sort of an example of a light and dark background next to each other. So we're looking at the same charts here, slightly different variations on the color. But as I said before, visualization typically tends to follow any UX and design trends, and dark backgrounds is no different. And we saw Peter's tweet from a couple of slides ago that clearly people using the number of people using dark backgrounds on Tableau and in the community is definitely increasing. And a sort of key debate in this space is that dark backgrounds actually conflict with one of the core visualization principles, which is to optimize the data to ink ratio. For those of you who aren't aware of this ratio, it's a principle defined as using the least amount of ink possible to display the data, and that every bit of ink on the page should have a meaning. So, one could argue that having background as a dark color is a lot of ink and not really any data at all. On the other hand, you could say that this doesn't really apply to the background, because as you can see here, the charts really seamlessly flow into the background because it's transparent, right? I definitely tend to side with the latter, and it's of my opinion that the background is not classed as ink. and it's merely just a canvas for your visualization. So that was a bit of background about dark mode and how that sort of has translated into visualization and the rise in the community. But now we're going to discuss some of the benefits. And I feel like there's 4 key recognized benefits here, which you could potentially use in visualization. So a lot of the research online suggests that using dark mode reduces blue light, which has been said to be beneficial for sleep. And there's a concept called bright burn, where the screen actually shocks your eyes if it is really bright and your surrounding conditions are low. So think you get woken up by a text at 2 o'clock in the morning, you turn on your phone, the screen's really bright, your eyes are shocked. That's essentially bright burn. And perhaps this is actually why we see dark backgrounds in industry. So think about things like airplane cockpits, hospital monitors, and satellite navigation in the nighttime. These are typically dark screens. Now, you might be thinking these are quite niche examples, and if anyone is on the call who actually builds for those specific examples, I'd love to hear that. But nonetheless, you want to maybe still consider this. So interestingly, actually, a study from Twitter found that users spent more time on the app when users had it in a dark mode as opposed to light mode. Now, this may have negative connotations in terms of spending too much time on social media isn't necessarily a healthy trait, but it could actually be suggested that, dark mode means more time on the app. Does that translate to visualization? Does that mean more people are going to spend time on our visualizations and dashboards? I guess that's an interesting question and one which hasn't really been answered yet, but my hypothesis there may be because they're potentially more appealing to look at, maybe softer on the eye, but yeah, we're sort of yet to see on that one. So whilst many of us might not be building directly for low light conditions, perhaps we need to actually consider the use of both. So maybe, you want to build for someone who's working into the evening, or in the winter when it gets dark here in London at like 4 o'clock, and maybe someone wants to just switch that toggle. Actually, as well, you just have personal preference, right? I'm sure different people on the call, some people like dark mode, some people prefer light mode. And this is a great example by Fouad. And he, in this quite recent visualization, he's actually given his users a toggle in the top right-hand corner to switch from dark mode to light mode. And I think that's a great idea. It gives his visualization a real sort of product and application type feel. And I spoke with him, and he said he's just used a dashboard URL function just to move across. And I guess it could be done with show and hide containers, but then you're going to have more stuff to render in one view. I'm sure there's something that you could do fancy with parameter actions as well. And of course, there was a lot of comments like there are on Twitter. As I said, Twitter's buzzing on the visualization side. A lot of people were chiming in on the comments. Some people said, I prefer dark mode, I prefer light mode. A lot of people just said, they like both because it is a great visualization. So the jury was pretty split in terms of which one they preferred, but it was great to have the option, I thought. So I encourage everyone to check out his stuff, especially this visualization. It's pretty cool. So another good use case for using dark backgrounds in visualization is if you're going to be presenting on a TV screen or on a projector in full screen mode. And it's actually a safer option because you may not know the quality of the screen, and a poor screen can be more forgiving on a dark background than a light screen, because a light screen can really sort of fade out. So if you're going to present at a conference or you're going to like a venue that you don't know about, you're actually going to be safer to use a dark background. It also fills up the whole space as well. So if not extended to the full screen, some of the surrounding elements can be a little bit distracting, especially if those surrounding elements aren't of a similar color. So if the surrounding elements are quite light, that can sort of stick out unintentionally for the audience and be a distractor. And obviously you want everyone focusing on your visualization. And there's been some evidence to suggest that dark mode leads to faster decision making, which I thought was a super interesting insight. And it was actually Salesforce who conducted this study, and they looked at this light mode and the dark mode, and they had one in the middle called a hybrid mode, which essentially was a combination of the both. And they've used this these summary sort of KPIs as a hero section, which they've highlighted in dark, I guess, to try and attract people to that section. Their hypothesis was that the dark mode would be more appealing to users. And they thought this because they typically only use light mode. So they thought the novelty of the dark mode would, really attract people and spark some interest. But they didn't really think of anything on the performance. They thought in terms of accuracy and faster decision making, it would be the same. So they tested impressions, they tested preference, value, and performance. And for performance, they actually measured, like as I said, the time and accuracy of the two different charts or two different pages. And the results were for preference and impressions. Light mode was actually favored. So participants preferred the lighter mode, then the high mode, and finally the dark mode, which obviously was against their hypothesis. And for impressions, so first impressions, participants had better first impressions of both lighter themes as opposed to the dark mode. Maybe they were taken a bit aback by the dark mode. But interestingly, for performance, it was actually a different story. And they found that the users made faster, but just as accurate decisions with the chart and the dark theme. So perhaps there is actually some benefit here for using dark mode for data visualization. It could lead to quicker insights. Again, some more experimentation needs to be discovered here. I've not found too much on this topic, but if anyone does know anything, do reach out. So the final benefit is about storytelling. And I think using a dark background is a really good way to aid and tell your story. I was fortunate enough to be at TC19 last year in Vegas. Obviously such a shame it's not going to be going ahead this year, but hopefully we'll be back next year. And we dialed in, we were there live for the Iron Viz, and Josh, who was one of the finalists, or the winner actually, joint winner, he actually used a light variation and a dark variation to aid his story. So that was a really good use case there. Another one I wanted to highlight was actually just this week, so again, timely. Dhruv posted this visualization about mental and physical health to show the reflection between the two. And it shows the reflection in terms of like the information he's actually displaying, but we're actually seeing a physical reflection here in terms of the colors that he's used. So that's actually really, really clever. I really like that. And this is typical we see in infographics typically to compare things side by side. And it's a great technique to use if you ever do want to have that comparison. It really draws your attention to the left side, and then even reflecting the colors on the right side works absolutely perfectly. So definitely go and check that one out. And you also have branding. So colors can definitely help, of course, with branding, and using a dark background is the same here. So Praveen recently did this one on a Makeover Monday, and obviously it's looking at Amazon. And I think even if you took away the Amazon logo, you'd still know that that's what it was talking about, because the colors of the background and the foreground obviously help you do that. So that's how storytelling can help. And I've actually got a bonus benefit, which I didn't mention before, and that is that I think they look awesome. So how many times have you seen, or people heard that, oh, those colors really pop, or dark backgrounds really make the colors pop? This word seems to keep appearing. And I think it's just easier to be achieved with a dark background. I have no science to sort of back that up, but just from what I've seen anecdotally on Twitter, I think it's maybe just a nicer contrast with the color. And I've read it 3 or 4 times on Fouad's toggle tweet. 3 or 4 different people said, oh, this viz really pops. I love the dark mode, it really pops. So I'm definitely not the only one there. This visualization from Ellen Blackburn was part of a wider series called the Doomsday Clock. You may have seen it. And she's actually managed to make those yellow and sort of pink lines in the middle look like they're illuminated. And I really don't think that would be possible with a light background. So that's a super cool use case. And I really like that whole series she did there. So, of course, the dark backgrounds can look good on Tableau Public, and this is Tableau Public where we're a bit more creative. But they do look good on business dashboards and internal data products too. So this is an internal product that we built very recently at Expedia Group, and the feedback around the dark background is great. I mean, people are saying it's a sleek design, it's looking great, and that's before they've even digging into the numbers. So we've already got them hooked, and I think that's one of the first steps, right? So they're going to want to come back, they're going to want to do more and do more insights. And what helps here as well is we've actually embedded this into a website. So using JavaScript and HTML. So it's actually using that full screen principle that I described before as well. So we think it works really well. And obviously you can't see a lot of the data here because a lot of it is anonymized, but what I wanted to show you here was around like the background colors you can use. I've sort of played with some purples and some blues here, and it is a little bit more difficult to get a good dark background color palette than it is a light one. Light one, I've just tended to throw whites and grays in there, and it's just seemed to work because it's a bit more natural. But with this, it's a bit more trial and error. We'll be sending the slides around, and I'll include this slide, or at least include the color palette, so you guys can take that as well. And some exciting news, we're actually going to be starting a Tableau public page soon for Expedia Group. visualization team. So watch out for that space, and hopefully you'll hear something soon from either myself or David Perez on Twitter or LinkedIn. And we're hoping to get this one up there, obviously with maybe just some Superstore data. Those were the benefits of using dark backgrounds, but of course, with most things, there's two sides of the coin. So if you are thinking, you know, I love dark backgrounds, but you know, there's some considerations to think about. So if a visualization has a lot of text, or you're building an infographic perhaps with where it's lots of text and maybe less visualization, then a dark background may not be the best option. And this is because scientific studies have concluded that the brain reads text when exposed to positive polarity, i.e. that's the dark text on a light background. It reads the text better, sorry. And using a negative polarity, so that is the other way around, this could hinder reading performance and ultimately could end up straining the user's eyes. And that's because white as a color stimulates all three types of color sensitive visual receptors in the human eye in pretty much equal amounts. And this makes reading white paragraph text on dark backgrounds quite stressful. White also reflects wavelengths of light. Because the words and letters in continuous prose are compact and closer together, when the white text reflects the light, the reflected light ends up reflecting and scatters across to the neighboring letters and words, and that makes it just harder to read. It may not be so bad here because it's a bit wider, a bit bigger on the screen, but if you imagine having this in continuous prose, it would be quite difficult to read. In comparison though, having the black text on there absorbs the light and each word and each letter, and it just makes it much easier to read there. So typically why you don't see, you know, research articles or books printed with a dark background and light text. So we just said there that it's difficult to read white text on a black background. So it's definitely advised to tone down the black. So you may not, or you may not notice that a lot of the applications like WhatsApp and Twitter don't actually use pure black. Well, if they do use pure black, it's very much that background color. And then on top, there's like boxes with charcoals and grays. And this is because pure black, so when we talk about pure black, I mean here the hex code of 6 zeros. This can be hard to look at for quite a long time, and using a dark gray or a charcoal, or you can even mix in some really darker shades of greens, blues, purples. It's just much easier on the eye. You can express elevation and depth, and it's much easier to see shadows as well. As I said, I've used blues and greens and stuff personally, and the good thing about that is you can actually use accents of those colors. So if you take the dark teal example, you might want to then take that same color and just put it along the spectrum, and then you can use accents of that in your visualization to make it look like one color, and that can look really cool. So yeah, as I said, the benefit here is that it reduces the eye strain, and you don't have to adapt to that brightness of the white, pure white on pure black. And interestingly, when researching about this, it actually turns out that it's also suggested not to use pure black on pure white background. So it does actually work both ways in that effect. So heavy text and avoiding pure black, you could actually say were accessibility considerations anyway. But what we're talking about here is the contrast ratio, and that's between the foreground and the background color. Now, of course, it's important with any type of background, but I've just seen it more widely maybe like misused with darker backgrounds. I think mainly just because we're used to lighter backgrounds and using darker text. So the ratio should be roughly 5:1. And there's a great tool by WebAIM where you can just go and simply input your hex codes, and that's going to tell you whether you're meeting accessibility standards. So really check that out if you've not seen it before. And I did a little experiment here where I tested a sort of mid blue and just an off white on a sort of off purpley black background. And the blue came out as 4.38:1, and the white came out as 15:1. So the white was definitely performing better than the blue here. The blue wasn't so bad in terms of if you had it on really large text or a call to action button, it may have been okay. And some of you may be thinking, no, both of them are as easy to read as each other. Whereas some of you may be looking at it thinking, actually, yeah, I am struggling to read the blue a bit more. And I think that's really the point, right, of accessibility standards, is that we all have different eyesights. We all have different eyes in that respect, and some people have vision impairments, and unfortunately this contrast ratio is your eyes deteriorate as you get older. So this is definitely an important consideration, as well as your usual like color blindness and other visualization requirements. Although earlier I mentioned that the background doesn't necessarily associate with ink on the page when talking about the data to ink ratio. If you're going to be printing out handouts, printing out your visualizations, the printer is definitely going to know it's ink. You're going to use a lot of it, and it probably isn't going to come out very well. If you do need to print for a meeting, maybe, or you know it's always going to get printed in a report, you're either going to have to invest in a high quality printer or just have a light version of it, or maybe avoid dark backgrounds altogether if that's the case. But this tweet from Ravi, although it was a year ago, over a year ago now, it did sort of make me chuckle when preparing for this presentation. And he was saying that he uses, dark background as a nudge because it costs more for the executives to print them off, so then they don't end up doing it, which I thought was very good. But on the flip side, you've got Chris in the comments there saying, we had complaints about dark background because they wanted to print. So I guess the lesson here is make sure you know your audience. How is your end user going to be consuming your visualization? Hopefully you know that in your organizations. If you don't, then you can definitely find out by things like focus groups, surveys, and stuff like that. So should we turn up the light? Should we up sticks and forget light mode and just use dark mode from now on? You need to test your conditions, of course. You need to ask yourself questions like, will there be paragraph text? Lots of it. Will my audience need to print this off? Will they be viewing it in full screen mode, etc., etc.? I think we should definitely let the users choose. I mean, this is a great functionality on the toggle. We'd be replicating what Apple and Google, etc. are doing. Fouad did a great job, as you saw earlier. There's also examples in the community from Chantilly in Lovelytics. They've done some cool dashboards, more business dashboards as well, so maybe more relevant for some people on the call. And I think it is worth the extra effort, right? You build your dashboard. At the end, you duplicate. You can change the colors out. I think that's just a great bit of functionality. So is it a fad or is it the future? So personally, I think this is part of a wider trend, which focuses on design in Tableau. Ultimately, I'd like more research to be done in this field. Looking forward to what the next sort of fad will be. I'm thinking something around gradient backgrounds. We're starting to see a little bit of that come in. Interested to learn more about that. But of course, with anything, questions in visualization, the answer does seem to be it depends. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat on the questions. Reach out to me on Twitter and LinkedIn. But that's everything for me. Thanks very much for listening.
Appreciate it very much, Nathan. I marked a question to have you answer live, and it was about accessibility. So you
Cool.
Nailed that. And I don't think there's a better lead-in than that question for Emily. So appreciate it. So next up, we have Emily, our own, the leader of the Tableau Fringe Festival and one of the co-leaders of the Data Fam Community Jam. She's going to be talking about accessibility and data visualization. So perfect lead in. Thanks, Nathan. Emily, all yours. Emily, we can't hear you if you're talking.
All right, here we go. Sharing my screen. And Kevin, I just want to do a check to make sure you can see that.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Emily Coombe, and I am talking about accessibility in data visualization today. This is primarily a primer. So I wanted to share this information because I started my journey in understanding and learning about accessibility probably in 2010. And during that time, I was a business system administrator. I was a bank examiner representing the business when we were redeveloping a system. And my IT manager got a knock on her door that said, hey, by the way, that system that you're redeveloping is not accessible. And I had no idea what that meant. So I started to learn about Section 508 compliance, which is in the US, and what is accessibility and what does it mean? And it was a fantastic learning experience. But But so that's what started my journey with it. And now where I'm at with it is that I have a family member who has macular degeneration. So he is losing his eyesight. And my daughter has dyslexia. So understanding font choices is really important. So that's where I've come today in accessibility and why I'm even interested in it, because it seems like a random topic. But what I really love is that the whole purpose of accessibility, whether it's in data visualization or just generally, is to help people, as many people, see and understand your work. So that's kind of how I got started learning about accessibility. So today what we're going to talk about is what is accessibility, what does it mean, what are some of the requirements, simple ways to be more accessible, and then some challenges ahead. So what is accessibility? It's more than colorblindness. I think that's the one that gets a lot of discussion, but it also includes blindness, the inability to see visual information. It of course includes color blindness, limited vision, where people can see but not very well. Includes deafness, so not being able to hear sounds reliably. Low dexterity, so unable to use like a mouse or pointing device, and needing to use a keyboard or a switch. Low comprehension, so I'm having problems understanding content. Low reading, so the idea there is that you have problem reading text. And epilepsy. So you might have, somebody may be subject to epileptic episodes. So I want to share with you this experience, because a lot of times, I mean, we see the words and some of them may catch our attention more than others, but unless you're in it, I don't know that we can really fully appreciate what that's like. So I am going to pop out of my presentation and going to start this example.
Weekday bar to center. Effective January. Visited link vertical layout bar. Link destination. Link reverse trip. Table with 15 rows and 1 columns. This table shows schedules for a selection. Regional rail schedule weekday to Center City, Philadelphia. Listed in the columns. Row 1, column 1, train number dash dash greater. Edge of table. Edge of table. Train number dash dash greater. Zone station name. Row 2. Edge of table. 2. Link Chestnut Hill East. Out of table. This table shows schedules for a selection of key stops on the route for Chestnut Hill East Line Regional Rail schedule weekday to Center City, Philadelphia. Stops and their schedule times are listed in the columns. Table with 15 rows and 25 columns. This table shows schedules for Regional Rail schedule weekday to Center City, Philadelphia. Listed in the columns. Row 1, column 1, 705. Column 2, 707.
Okay, so
that was using a screen reader with just a rail table for Philadelphia SEPTA system. And imagine, I mean, it's easy to imagine, I think, a spreadsheet full of numbers or a text table full of numbers and having a screen reader read through that. By the time you get to the bottom, like, do you remember what happened at the beginning? And so it was amazing to me when I started researching this and really having that experience of the screen reader, that I was like, oh, now I understand why there are some of the recommendations that there are when it comes to designing our dashboards and designing things for accessibility, for that assistive technology. So what's required? So we have WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and there are 4: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And perceivability is really the ability to identify content and the interface elements. Operability is being able to use controls and buttons. Understandable, having predictable design and consistent in the technology. Robust IT, and that's really making sure that the information technology systems that we're using are compliant with standards and that assistive technologies can work with it. So in the beginning, when I was sharing kind of how I got started learning about accessibility, I mentioned Section 508. And in the US, you may have heard about Section 508, but really, like, what's the difference between that and WCAG? I had that question, and I learned that Section 508 was recently amended, and it's now written to address WCAG level AA, which basically means that if an organization complies with Section 508, they can be pretty confident that they're going to be in compliance with any other accessibility standard. And so you might be thinking, well, like, what does that mean? So sometimes if you receive federal funding, you have to comply with those accessibility requirements. If you are an organization that does work with the federal government, you need to comply. So there are some of those, the scope of Section 508 outlines who has to comply. All federal agencies must comply with it as well. But because it's written to those WCAG standards, that web content, really that applies to, it should apply to every organization. So all organizations should really be designing for that compliance. So here's a breakdown of what's required. I'm not going to necessarily go through all of this. However, there's a link to this in my presentation that you can have. But what I really wanted to highlight is that WCAG, or I'm sorry, Section 508 is really in that level A and level AA box. And level AAA is really, that's like the highest standard that you can, the highest standard of compliance you can achieve. So in level AA, I'm just going to cover a few things that that it requires, like live videos have captions. There's a content ratio between text and background of at least 4.5 to 1. Let's see. Oh, don't use image of text. And that is one, as I was reading through some of these requirements, I was like, oh, I thought about the time that I wanted a fancy font that wasn't in Tableau Public, and how I created it in Canva and then downloaded it as an image and then put it into my visualization. Well, that really isn't a best practice. I shouldn't really do that. So those are just a couple of things around level AA compliance. Okay, so considerations and ways to solve them. So for the consideration of blindness, being unable to see visual information, the way to solve that is through sonification or the use of a screen reader or voiceover. For color blindness, you can use contrasting colors, or you can also do double encoding, like a color and an arrow. For limited vision, being able to select a readable font and using white space. If someone's deaf, then having a visual display and not relying so much on audio or captioning. If someone has low dexterity, you can make the product accessible with a keyboard. For low comprehension, using annotation. For low reading, using high contrast and font choice. The font choice matters. And for epilepsy, the way that you can solve for that is not having more than 3 flashes in 1 second. So I wanted to cover several of those considerations. For color blindness, the 2 primary approaches for this are to use a colorblind friendly palette, or to use high contrast red and green. That's personally my favorite. And this was just a VizCheck example of a blue and orange palette and a high contrast red and green. And so you could go through and select the type of color vision that you wanted to simulate. For low vision, font size and font choice matters. So, you know, we see here that there's a very pretty executive overview and a very scripty, pretty font, but that can actually be hard to read. So sticking with fonts that are readable. And also, those bands that we love are great for people with low vision. And when it comes to low vision, contrast matters. And it's not just for colorblind folks. That light gray on that white background is super hard to read, even though it works really well with that map. So here are some other actionable tips for accessibility. Alt text your images. So I have on the right-hand side, what's more informative for a screen reader, Image 1 demo or sales by geography in the continental US, right? If a screen reader were reading that, sales by geography would be much more informative. Now, Nate actually talked about checking the contrast, and I found this contrast checker through my research. It's actually contrast-ratio.com. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip the demo there, but I wanted to show you just a couple of things. I selected 3 different types of palettes, this black and white. It has a very high contrast. And what I noticed about this also, just in these little screen captures that I have, is that there's double encoding going on. So there's the green button. So I've got the green, yellow, and red saying good, careful, and don't use it. But I also have numbers as well that help guide me. So I have the black and white, I have the orange and blue, and the green and red. If you were to use this as a way to check your contrast, what you'll also see if you were to hover over that button is that there is information as it relates to the WCAG levels of compliance. So it would say this is good for a AA, or if you were to bold this, it would be good at AAA. So I thought that was super informative as well. Another actionable tip is to use white space. The white space helps detect differences. And so we can see a difference here between not using white space in the bar chart and when we use white space. Another actionable tip for accessibility is your font choice. Not only selecting the font, but how we construct our sentences. So Arial seems to be, I thought Arial was a perfectly font choice. But then when you compare Arial to Verdana, you can see that the I and the L's in Arial look very similar and could be confusing versus Verdana, which you can definitely see that capital I and the difference between the capital I and the L. And what I found to be really interesting is that look at the differences between Arial, Tahoma, and Verdana. You can see the character spacing and how that can be more readable for others. You also want to make sure that your font choice can accommodate increased text sizes without losing that readability or functionality. Annotate to understand. That's another actionable tip. So we have this beautiful visualization, but without any kind of annotation, it may be very difficult to understand what it's saying. And I don't know about you, but I remember that feeling, and I feel like I'm a reasonably smart person, but I remember being in a class when they showed a graph. It was an interest rate risk modeling class I was in, and they showed a graph and they're like, okay, everybody read this graph. And I had this moment of panic and dread because I had no idea. So even SNP people need annotation. So being able to annotate helps everybody understand, from the person who has perhaps some low comprehension of the subject matter to the executive who just needs that information quickly to move on to the next thing. When it comes to testing flashes, there's a tool out there. This tool is available for people who have Windows. And if you have a Mac, you can run Boot Camp to run this. And it allows you to test the number of flashes per second and whether it passes or fails that threshold. So if you were using flashes in your visualization or your work, this would be a really great tool for you to have. And I have the link to it in my resources section here. But make sure that any flashes that you have in your data don't cause health issues. Now, while it's not necessarily a flash per se, I did check Viz animations just to see where that was coming in at. And the Viz animations in the fast section comply with that level, that standard for accessibility, where it would be no more than 3 per second. Simple is better. Remember that SEPTA example where the screen reader is of the numbers. Again, if we can aggregate it up so it doesn't overwhelm the screen reader and what that person has to comprehend, it can effectively get across the data's message. So those are some simple ways, but we do have some challenges. Interactivity. Can a screen reader read a Viz tooltip? Chart types. You know, it's easier to put into a table a line chart, a bar chart, or a pie chart, but what about network diagrams? That's not so easy. And some big data, like having so many numbers can be overwhelming. There are challenges that we do need to find a balance and a solution for. And we do have those challenges, but as a community, I do believe we can find solutions for that. And so I have this bit.ly link here. If you are interested, I'm thinking about running a little hackathon, because what I'd love to do is to show examples of accessible visualization, because I think that helps us. When we see it, we can then understand what to do and model after that in our work and our public lives. All right, so I'm not planning to go through all of these, but here are all of the resources that I used to put together this presentation. And I'd love to connect. Accessibility is so interesting to me, so you can email me or you can connect with me on Twitter. And that's it for me.
Great, you got me on so many things, Emily. That image, taking the image of the like a title because you want a different font, like I'm the king of that, even at work, not just Tableau Public. So you got me. I need to fix that. All right, so thank you,
All right.
Emily. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job. All right, next up, Mr. Christian Felix from the Tucson Tug. Christian's a great guy. Recently, he and I just did a collaboration together. So, and he did like 90% of the work. So,
not true.
I like helped him with a few things. So, anyways, Christian's going to be talking about designing for user adoption. So, I'm going to hand it over to you, sir.
All righty. Bring up my screen. And go ahead and give me the old thumbs up that I'm good to go.
You got a thumbs up for me.
All right, so thank you, Kevin. Thank you, the team at the DataFam Community Jam, for inviting me to speak. As Kevin mentioned, I'm going to be speaking on dashboard development for end user adoption. So quickly, I'll just provide some info about myself, some context as to where this presentation came from. I'll go through the design principles for user adoption, and we'll wrap up, maybe not actually, considering time, with Q&A, but we'll see. All right, so a little bit about me. So this is my Tableau public visual resume. I jumped on the bandwagon last year and produced a visual resume. It was just a great experience for me to be creative, explore some design options, and then just reflect a little bit about where I've been in my career. So I actually started out in finance. My degree from the University of Arizona is in finance, got a master's degree in finance. Started out working in finance at a company called Raytheon. I sort of always gravitated towards process improvement, IT-based work. Eventually, I found myself in IT at Raytheon, at which point I did a distance master's in analytics program through Texas A&M. It was there back in around 2013 where I was exposed to Tableau. You get that free student license for a year. I took advantage of it. It pretty much immediately made a lot of the data exploration visualization tasks I was doing much more productive, efficient, and enjoyable. So from there, I brought the tool back to Raytheon, was involved in rolling it out. About 5 years ago, I moved over to Roche here in Tucson, and I get to work with Tableau every day, building dashboards and analytics for people all over the world. Yeah, so that's me. If you haven't checked it out, there's an amazing interactive resume gallery Tableau Public has out there. Check it out. Lots of good options for inspiration to create your own. Okay, so I included a little snapshot of this book just to sort of piggyback on what I said. This is a book called Range. I read it earlier this year, and the theory of this book is really why generalists succeed in today's world as opposed to the specialists. So that's kind of my career in a nutshell. Starting out in finance, moving to IT. I'm not in IT now, I'm actually in quality. So really one of the arguments David Epstein in this book makes is you bring these sort of cross-domain analogies from your prior experiences to solve problems in your current work, and I found that to be true. So if you're looking for a summertime read, I'd recommend it. It's a quick read and it's a good read. Okay, so Project Health Viz. I participate in that fairly regularly, not as regularly as I would like this year, but a project initiated by Lindsay Betzendahl. It's an opportunity really to visualize and raise awareness of health, public health issues, personal health issues. I've put together some vizzes I have up on the screen. For me, it's really just been a great way to be creative, sort of think out of the box, practice some new things in terms of design and techniques, functionality. And many times I end up taking what I did out in Tableau Public back to work and implementing things there. So if you haven't participated in Project Health Viz, I'd highly recommend it. Yeah. I've had a few viz of the day, so these are a few of them up on the screen. This was actually one of my first visualizations I published Tableau Public about the California fires, I believe a year or so ago. One on World No Tobacco Day, and the Washington Post last year produced this just amazing data set that tracked every opioid sale throughout the US. I focused on the state of Arizona and produced this visualization. And recently I was looking at the New York Times coronavirus case data, and I produced this visualization that was promoted and put on the Tableau COVID Data Hub. So these are my viz of the days. And I also co-lead the Tucson Tableau user group. So there's our beautiful city. As I mentioned in the chat, in the meeting, it's a dry heat. So it's not quite as bad as it could be potentially. But we've just started this group about a year and a half ago. We've grown it quite a bit. We've done some partnerships and collaborations with the university, the Phoenix Tableau user group. And yeah, just looking to build the community here locally and beyond. It's been a lot of fun. If you are on Twitter, I am also, you can follow me at the C Felix. Okay. All right, so I work for Roche, a branch of the business here in Tucson called Tissue Diagnostics, but we're much more than tissue diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, instrument product, tissue diagnostics, personalized healthcare. So it's been a great time to work for Roche. As many of you may have seen in the news, we've been involved in doing what we can to help the world during this time of pandemic. So we released a molecular test and an antibody test this spring. And it's been an extremely busy year, but at the same time, been an excellent opportunity to be part of that. All right, so now getting into dashboard development for end user adoption. So I'm going to go through 5 principles. I don't claim that they're original thinking by any means, but they're things that perhaps you are doing in your context that you may help from seeing what we're doing. If there's just one thing that you can take away and implement in your context, then this has been fruitful and useful in my opinion. And I am going to be showing things that we have done in the business. All the data has been both anonymized and either blurred out or erased to keep me from getting in trouble from the legal side. So one of the first things that we've done is, I mentioned I don't work for IT. So myself, the team, we work in the business in quality. We're working with service data. We're embedded directly in the business. I've worked on the IT side. I've seen firsthand the bureaucracy, the long lead times in terms of project fulfillment. Maybe that's not how it is in your organization, but that's been my experience. So we work directly with the people who are encountering the problems in the business. We're in the same meetings. We're rubbing shoulders with them. We're hearing their pain points so that we can take those things and implement and produce analytic solutions that answer those questions. So it's very much an agile, iterative delivery methodology. We're delivering, we're providing solutions, we're then getting feedback, iterating again, and producing a deliverable. Sort of like the goal that we've had throughout this whole process was 3 clicks to an answer. So the desire is that an end user can come to our dashboard and within 3 clicks get the answer they were looking for when they came to the dashboard. So make things as easy as possible on our consumers. So this is just a very rough view of our user base. We're a global company, so we have consumers of our Tableau dashboards all over the world. So we're in Tucson, so it has grown substantially in terms of our user base. We've started out here. We still have a lot of users here, but we have users in just about all of the continents save Antarctica. So it's both something really cool, and it's also a challenge to sort of bridge those cultural chasms that may exist in terms of interpreting and consuming information. So the first thing that I want to talk to is trust, all right? And this is sort of the principle here. It doesn't matter how well your dashboard is designed. It can be beautiful, implementing best practices and all that. If the underlying data is inaccurate, your users will not adopt the tool. Some of you may have realized that as well in your own experience, but it's sort of a snowball effect where one small thing can be found in terms of an inaccuracy, and before you know it, they're just throwing out the entire thing. So what we've tried to ensure we do is we try and understand if there's an issue with the data before any of our customers do. It's not always possible, but that's what we're developing to in terms of our architecture. The worst thing that can happen, in our opinion, is we get to work or we fire up the computer on a Monday or Tuesday morning and we have an email saying, this doesn't look right. I think there's an issue with the dashboard that's been validated in production. We don't want that to happen. So we've tried to put in place mitigation efforts to avoid those situations. So what you're looking at here is just a simple Tableau dashboard. Each one of these rows is tied to one of our data sources. And we're leveraging, in this case, the native alert functionality within Tableau Server. So whenever we see a delay in a data source, such as a data warehouse load date is delinquent, we get a KPI that turns from green to yellow to red. We also get an email saying, hey, you might want to check on this data source. There is perhaps an issue with the data load. So what happens if there is a successful data load, but the data that's been loaded is actually incorrect? So we've also here taken advantage of the Tableau Server alert functionality. And what we've done is we've gone back in history to find a date or a month when we know the data is stable. We've implemented that via parameter in just a dummy dashboard that sole purpose is to alert us if there's an issue with the data source. And we basically say if the data in a certain month is past what we know to be true for that month, then send us an email saying there may be a change with the data source. So obviously those two things are not exhaustive in terms of what you can do to try and get ahead of data source issues. They're just two things that we found to be effective for helping us resolve some of those issues. If you have things that you guys do, I'd love to hear about them in the chat as well. Okay, so we're talking about trust. So timely, transparent communication. So using whatever channels you guys have in place, whether it's Slack, for us it's Google+, Google Currents, mass emails. We want to, again, make sure that whenever there's an issue with Tableau Server, whether there's updates, maintenance things going on, that our users are notified before they're in a meeting presenting to key stakeholders and the dashboard goes down. So we want to be communicating those things as fast as we can and get to as many users as possible. Okay, so trust and consistency. We've developed just standard templates for our dashboards, things that when we are going to have a validated dashboard or one that's pushed into production, we want to follow to the best of our ability. So that includes standard icons, it includes standard headers, it includes a footer section that provides useful information in terms of who's viewing the dashboard, what time they're viewing it, in case they print it out and to go back to compare the data, they have a timestamp as to what point they were looking at the data, just so they have that on record. What data source they're looking at, when the data was updated, who published it, who's the author, and some version control information as well. So really the point of all this is to allow our users to view any of our dashboards, and although the dashboards are conveying different information, the format and the feel is consistent. Again, best practice, adopt a standard color palette. Should match corporate branding. We've done that here as well. So nothing special there, just basically the importance of using a standard color palette across your tools. So color, font, templates, and also iconography. So for basic navigation buttons, we try and use standard home, forward, backward, and information button icons. We also try and publish some things to increase the data fluency and data literacy of people who are consuming our dashboards. So things like header layouts, chart selections. We've leveraged this HICR Feist international standards in terms of business communication. Just useful constructs for standardizing on ways to communicate data. And this is something that I found to be true. Perhaps it resonates with you. The more intimately involved you are with your viz, your end product, the further away you can get from the initial user experience. So all those things I just mentioned, consistency with colors, with your template, with your layout, those things can feel constrictive perhaps at times, but ultimately they're there to protect that initial end user experience. Of course, you're going to do testing. Of course, you're going to have peer reviews, all those things. But what we found is the best chance of success in terms of adoption that you can give yourself is to use standard templates, standard colors, all these things standard across your tools. It'll help simplify things for your end users. All right, so trust, consistency, and flexibility. Okay, so this is an example of one of our tools. We don't do this in all cases, but we like to recognize the fact that there's multiple ways to visualize data, right? And so we oftentimes include selectors that allow, assuming it fits with the dashboard and the end purpose, that allow the user to view the data different ways, whether it's a stacked bar chart, a geographical view, or a small multiple view. We want to give the user flexibility to view those things in the different ways. So we found that to be useful and that to be a good UI UX practice, not in all cases, but in some cases for our tools. And Rob Rouse posted this earlier this year, and it got a lot of interaction on Twitter. And I agree with it to a certain extent. And because I agree with it, we haven't fought that in our development. And what I mean by that is we recognize that there's going to be a segment, perhaps a large segment of the population that is going to want to take what you do in Tableau and export it into Excel. If that's the first thing they're doing as soon as they get to the dashboard, then there's probably an issue with the dashboard. But what we've tried to do is make it possible within 2 or 3 clicks to allow a user to get to a very easily exportable table if they want to get the detail behind the charts and the visual. The other thing we've tried to do is just make sure that we're providing value by providing as much information as possible in a single source of truth. So this is just an example of one of our service dashboards. Again, all the data is anonymized and removed, but you can see there's lots of different metrics there. It's simple, it's nothing fancy or complex. Bar charts, lines, APIs, Pareto charts. But in terms of conveying the basic information as to how am I doing at this point, it does an extremely effective job. We've also tried to provide feedback that is not dependent on us answering either a call or an email in the moment. So recording simple videos. One of the best ways to help people gain efficiency with Tableau Server is just teach them how to create a custom view. So if they want to create a custom view, we have a 2-minute video that we put out on our broadcast channel. They can go access it. It's linked to many of our dashboards, and it's helped our users gain efficiency with the server. So trust, consistency, flexibility, and productivity. So we've created portals. We're trying to categorize all of our reports. We've developed probably hundreds of reports over the years. A fraction of those have been validated and have gone through our formal process. And with those, we put them in this portal to allow a user to go directly to the portal. And if they're looking for, let's say, a report on local cases, they can click through the local cases, bring up all the reports that we've put through our process and are available. We're really just trying to keep our end users out of the server environment. We're trying to do some change control interference with our portal, making sure they can access it without having to actually go directly to the server themselves. In addition to that, we're starting to try and leverage the Salesforce Tableau integration capabilities. So Salesforce Lightning is a way to embed apps, no-code apps directly into Salesforce. So we're trying to test out if we can embed our Tableau dashboards directly in Salesforce to allow our users, when they're in Salesforce, instead of having to go out to the Tableau server or to our website or to our portal, they can just view the Tableau viz directly in Salesforce. We've used Google Chrome extensions in the past to provide access to our reports directly in the Google Chrome browser for people. So this just makes their workflows a little more productive by having that available directly in the browser. And last but not least, ownership. So we started doing, we're calling them podcasts, but really it's interviewing an end user, asking just some simple questions about how they're using the tool. After they're done providing us with their use case, we provide some more information as to what the intention was in the development, some things they may not have known about the tool. And really all of it does a couple things. It provides us a recording of an interaction with a real user who is sharing his experience and why they've found that dashboard to be useful. So in a sense, it's promotional. It's an advocate for one of our tools. And it's also sort of initiating a sense of ownership. So here we have this end user who's using one of our tools, who is now sort of singing the tool's praises on a recording. And while it's being recorded, we're also making it available to other users who can learn this user's use case for the tool. So something we're starting to do. It's been a really good success so far. And yeah, the other thing we're starting to do is leverage Google+, Google Currents more and more. So not only for the service downtime communication, but also for basic announcements on training coming up, the e-learning, trying to get more engagement with our community via Google Currents. So that is the last principle I had. I went through it very quickly because I know I was the last presenter that stood between you and the rest of your day. So I'll conclude there. I thank you guys.
Hey, we got just one quick question for you. We got 7 minutes left, so I figured we'd sneak this one in. Someone asked if you could recommend any sort of templates or best practice standard sort of templates out there. Do you know of any that exist that you can kind of reference? Or
that's a good question. Nothing's coming to the top of my head. I did get a similar question when I presented this presentation to the virtual India Health Tug user group. And I did commit last time to providing a version of what I showed here on Tableau Public so it could be downloaded. And
Perfect.
I haven't gotten around to it yet, but it's still on my to-do list, so I can certainly do that.
I do think that Simon Beaumont and the group at JLL have done something with their company standards. I don't know if it fits, if it's a perfect match, but if you guys go to Tableau Public and look up JLL on Tableau Public, I think they have sort of a standards guide out there. But yeah, I'd love to see something from you, Christian. No pressure.
Yeah.
600 people on here that just listen to you tell us
It'll come at some point, I assure you. Patience.
All right, Christian, thank you. Appreciate it very much. Thank you to all of our presenters. I guess I should present my screen real quick. And get rid of that. Thank you to all 4 of the presenters. Awesome content. Thank you for all the attendees. There was tons of questions, tons of people chatting. So that's what we love to see. We're going to do this again. We'll be doing it again sometime in August. We haven't announced it yet. When we announce it, we will be also looking for presenters. So if you're interested in presenting, look for that announcement and try and register to present. And anyways, we appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for coming.